All right, Peach, we're in for a packed season of the mouthy and dramatic antics of Ginny and Georgia. Season 3 hits on some pretty serious and deep topics and still manages to include some sideways humor, and also introduces us to Poetry Guy. But has the show drifted too far into the melodramatic? Georgia has just been arrested for murder during her wedding, ruining her fairy tale ending and putting the spotlight on the Millers like never before. Now, Ginny needs to see where she stands when push comes to shove. Is the two of them against the world something Ginny really wants to sign up for? Alright, so just like in the previous seasons, this has 10 episodes that are all about an hour long, and some even more. So this is not only a hefty binge, but thanks to the emotionality and the deep dives into certain themes, this can take a toll on you mentally. Now, the season focuses around Georgia's murder trial, which causes, of course, all sorts of family stress, which then puts the kids into some precarious positions. And there's also the ongoing angsty issues that Ginny and her high school friends endure, many touching on some real-life issues, which I am going to get to in just a bit. And all then throughout, there are the tumultuous interactions between Georgia, Paul, Joe, Zion, and then just about everybody else in her life as she waits to see what her fate holds. If you've been a fan of this show, I think the season's going to continue to keep you engaged. Even though some of the dramatics are massively overblown, there's still this air of genuineness and relatability that help to make this engaging. Brianna Howie as Georgia, she's still the smart-mouthed, smooth-talking train wreck of a person that she has always been, constantly using her charm and wits to win people over and then bend the narrative to her benefit. But this time, she's also in a situation where controlling her version isn't necessarily possible. And I like how this provides several instances where we get to see both realizations of the consequences to her actions, but also then to see her recognize the growth opportunities. And as her trial goes along, the show doesn't consistently put us in the courtroom. We get some key moments for reveals and crushing testimonies, but a lot of what we see with Georgia is her in the downtime, as she just sits in her house, stuck in her never-ending circle of thoughts. And while this is repetitive, it also does help to put us into the same mindset as she deals with the monotony. And the feeling of boredom comes through loud and clear. And depending on your view of Georgia, you'll either feel some sympathy for her or look at her as getting just exactly what she deserves. Now, for a bit, I was worried that Howie was being locked into this one-dimensional character arc, simply having Georgia just go stir-crazy from her house arrest. But the show cleverly introduces elements and complications that allow for character depth and even a few tearjerker moments. And I did tear up at one point, because not only was the scene powerfully emotional, but Howie gave such a heartfelt performance that I was utterly connected, and I felt the sting that she was experiencing. And it's not often that an overly dramatic show can affect me like this, but thanks to how captivating the story became, despite all the theatrics, it pierced through the extra and then hit the target square in the center. And then we got the other half of the duo with Antonio Gentry as Ginny. And there are some powerful and devastating sequences that she has to sell in this. I'm impressed at the level of groundedness that Gentry provides her character. Ginny is probably more on her shoulders than the average teen, which is just how the show is framed. But whether or not the weight is real world or not, the circumstances have to feel legitimate and then rational in order for us to buy into the story. And Gentry, she accomplishes this with seeming ease. She rides a roller coaster of emotional ups and downs, and thanks to her deeply emotive eyes, the pain, joy, fear, even concern, they all translate through the screen well. And the dynamic Ginny shares with Georgia, it's not typical. I mean, with Ginny having to be the parent or responsible party way more than she should. But their camaraderie, which includes explosive fights and heartbreakingly tender moments, each surpasses the potential extravagant theatrics and then is able to address real issues that actual teens and families face. And for as angsty and overblown as a lot of this series is within the storytelling, I'm really impressed at how they confront and address sensitive topics that are important to have brought into the light. I mean, we know in previous seasons the show has dealt with self-harm, domestic abuse, even body image. I mean, those are still present too, and they're even discussed more blatantly. But this season also brings in addiction, alcoholism, emotional abuse, just general mental health, sexual wellness, even parental responsibilities. And there is a large focus on mental health. And while on the surface, it could be a bit pointed, maybe even preachy, the show is actually providing a service by not only calling these things out into the light and then addressing them without condemnation, but it also creates healthy, or at least believable examples on how to approach someone who may be dealing with one of these sensitive issues. And this takes dark and scary topics and then helps to remove stigmas, ideally creating safe spaces for conversations to begin, which is extremely important for anybody's mental health. And as an example of addressing a topic in conversation, we watched some members of the Mang bring up something that was worrying them. While it's awkward, cringy, even slightly distasteful, there's also some great humor that is disarming and it's compassionate. The characters fed off each other within the scene to take something that could have been a massive downer and used it to care for their friend while also making the spot safe to even begin a conversation. And I had mentioned earlier how with Georgia's trial, things get to be a bit repetitive. While that is absolutely true, especially while watching her in her sweats just moping around the house for indeterminate amounts of time, the story feels as though it also forgets that there is a murder trial going on. We get sporadic courtroom scenes. Trust me, I am not looking for yet another legal drama. But the story, it felt unsure of its focus and even the purpose through a lot of the trial. Almost as if they were on a massive recess and court just happened to meet once every so many weeks. Now, the show's not skimping on any of the drama in this. While I love the emotional investment, especially with the focus on mental health topics and how Ginny and Georgia navigate their relationship, this does dive way into soap opera territory many times, choosing excessive personal dramas to drive the conflicts. There's also a bunch of plot conveniences that allow certain characters to be in locations so that they overhear or witness information that they just normally wouldn't encounter. I mean, it's surprising at how much of the town frequents Joe's restaurant. And because that is where all of the gossip goes down, I mean, if you need to learn something, you just be there and you're bound to get all the details. These conveniences, though, they don't ruin the show, but they can provide easy outs for some of the storylines. Now, I appreciate how the show continues to weave in some genuine humor within all of the melancholy. There were several times that I laughed out loud during this season, thanks to not only the setups, but the timing and the expressiveness of the actors. There's one point where Ginny and Georgia discover a true crime story that's being produced. Their reactions are perfect, just eliciting the necessary disbelief and then outrage that translates into a hilarious moment. There's also a conversation between Joe and Georgia that is both awkward and funny, but it relies on Raymond A. Black's dry wit and timing to create these laughs. He shows excellent restraint, just creating the exact responses necessary for the levity of the moment. And really, with such a large ensemble cast, I mean, there are so many different moments where the characters get specific times that they can shine and become the focal point within the plot. Not only does this help with just the intrigue and the variety within the story, but it helps to keep us connected to all of the various story beats that could otherwise become very convoluted and forgotten. And surprisingly, almost all of them still manage to hold relevance and depth as we weave through the central arc. Now, I know the show isn't perfect and the melodrama can be way too much at times, but every time I go back to this series, I am impressed at how well it sucks me into the storytelling, crafting emotionally poignant and relevant moments that resonate and even haunt me. And I'm especially wowed at how delicately and effectively the series tackled multiple sensitive topics that surround mental health and physical safety. It's easy to either treat these flippantly or overbearingly, with either of those approaches really just diminishing, even eliminating any effectiveness. But instead, we're presented with tangible, healthy examples of how to address a serious topic, creating space for compassion and then growth. A season, it is a long one, and some of the story gets bogged down in repetition, even monotony. But thankfully, it never gets stuck there indefinitely, bouncing back to sequences that create laughter, tears, or genuinely touching drama. There's sex, no nudity, a bunch of profanity, and then some violence, including domestic assault and self-harm. I give Season 3 of Ginny and Georgia 4.5 out of 5 couches. I'm surprised too. I mean, this is one of those guilty pleasure shows that I have zero guilt over loving. And for something filled with such angsty drama, it is an affecting and excellent watch. So are you a fan of the series? Do you have a favorite character? I mean, outside of the 2 leads, I was really digging Poetry Guy, Brescia, and Abby this season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.